And I looked at the CEO and thought to myself, I do not want that life.
This is Jay Clouse, and he's a founder of Creator Science, which focuses on empowering creators to break through the noise.
I think every creator should adopt a strategy of one discovery platform and at least one relationship platform.
What do you think is the most necessary skill as a freelancer?
You need to understand business. I've always been someone who really believes in his ability to learn anything.
What would be the best way to start creating content?
You need to ask yourself, am I more drawn towards writing in text or video? Whatever you're doing, if you're not getting better, things are gonna get worse.
I want to know your own journey. How did you get into all of this, into content creation? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're here with the one and only Jay Clouse. Welcome to the Bad Decisions podcast.
Hey, I hope it wasn't a bad decision to come on the show.
Well, we'll find out by the very end of it, man. Bad decisions make good stories.
Yes. That's why we are called Bad Decisions.
Yes, bad decisions make good stories. And the reason we chose the name is because, whenever you're trying to make a new decision or something new, when you're trying to do something challenging in your life, usually people tell you, hey, don't do it, play it safe. You have to take the bad decisions. That will always change your life for the better. And that's why Bad Decisions, the name came around.
Cool. Well, I'll keep that in mind, and I'll tell my wife right after this, hey, I've been encouraged to make more bad decisions.
I don't think she's going to be fond of that. I don't think she's going to be fond
I think you should give her some context before telling her,
Well, first of all, I want to say if Farhad sounds like a girl today at some point, it's because he's losing his voice. But we just want to start by saying, Jay, thank you so much for joining the podcast. We've been following your journey for a while now, and me and Farhad have had extensive discussions about this. Since we started Bad Decisions Studio, the YouTube channel, we've studied the creator economy and content creation rigorously, even before starting the channel. And we had to go and look at all the Casey Neistats, the Gary V's, and figure out what exactly works in 2023 and now, of course, 2024. How can we show people what we're working on, our art, our researches, our tutorials, and try to reach as many people as possible. And we understand in 2024, content creation gives you leverage, right? It is one of the most significant things, especially with mainstream media now sort of not being as impactful as before, and the power of attention is now with people like us, people listening and watching, people like yourself. We understand the significance of it, but me and Farhad have never really had a proper 1-2 hour long conversation about it. We always really focus on the 3D immersive experiences with our audience, but we always wanted to have this discussion. And we think, and I have to give it to Farhad because Farhad's been, talking to me about you for a while now. And Farhad said, we got to bring Jay on because you are literally studying creators every day. You are the founder of Creator Science, and you have learned the ways, the ups and downs of being a creator. You talk to the best in the community, and you've helped so many creators go from 0 to 100. And you're doing that every single day yourself as well, which is why I think you're more than credible to give us and everybody listening and watching advice. So first thing I have to say is, I want to know your own journey. How did you get into all of this, into content creation?
Well, I got into entrepreneurship in college because that was when Airbnb and Uber and Facebook were new and hot. And so entrepreneurship was starting to have a moment as like this new sexy thing.
Yeah.
And I bought into that. I thought that was great. But I also really thought that entrepreneurship meant technology, software, startup, So I did that path for a little bit. We started a company in 2014. It was a ticket marketplace, sort of like StubHub, if you're familiar with StubHub. And we went through an accelerator and we raised money and we eventually sold that. And that was a really quick taste of this is what the startup world is like.
Yeah.
It was exhausting. I learned a lot. We had a good outcome, but I didn't want to do that again quite yet. So I started working at another software company, and they were super venture backed. They had so much money that they had raised. And I looked at the CEO and thought to myself, I do not want that life. That guy seemed miserable. This seems super hard. I am not going to go that route. So then I left that company, and I honestly didn't know what I would do. This is about 2017. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just had enough faith in myself that I could figure out how to make money on my own. And I wanted to no longer have a boss, because with the original startup company, I was one of the bosses. Then I suddenly was an employee, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I started freelancing. I call this my freelancing chapter. And while I was freelancing, I got the opportunity to create a course collaboratively with lynda.com, which eventually got acquired by LinkedIn Learning. And that opened my eyes to this world of courses. And I started thinking, if I can make a course for LinkedIn, I could probably make a course on my own. Some people were asking me about freelancing because I jumped in and was pretty successful at it pretty quickly. So I started teaching people how to freelance, and I built a course around that. And that opened up the whole can of worms of people who were doing email and courses. ClickFunnels was really big at the time. I never really got into that community or that product, but that was kind of the moment in time. The word creator wasn't really being used outside of YouTubers, you know? So I started looking at this though. I started seeing, how are people making a living with content? Because with my background in the startups, I got really good at this idea of product, like a software product. And I looked at what people were doing with content, and I thought, oh, they're approaching content as a product, and I could do that. I can write. So it started with just email. Email was my product. Then eventually I started creating courses and videos and podcasts and all these things. But I just had this product lens on using content to help people, to solve problems, and being kind of obsessive about learning and getting better. I was just looking at a lot of other people who were doing the same model and starting to distill and understand, why are they successful? Why are they not? What are they doing? Why is this thing that they're doing working? And I was really good at synthesizing that. So fast forward to today, a lot of what I do is apply that same skill set, but then write about it, make videos about it, record audio about it to explain how people are creators professionally.
Wow. How did you choose your medium? Like, you started with email, you have your own podcast, you make videos on YouTube. Was it easy to make that decision initially, or you had to go from one to the other one?
Initially, it was easy because initially I didn't even realize that I had a choice. Initially, it was, well, I consider myself a writer, so writing is what it's going to be. And it was all email because social media at the time, there was Twitter, there was LinkedIn, but people weren't writing on those mediums really. They weren't audience growth tools the way they're thought of today. Writing was really, are you writing a blog? Are you writing a newsletter? And if not, if you're using social media or YouTube, you've got to be good at video or great photography, you know? And I've never been great visually. The stuff I do visually now is it's done by great visual people.
Yeah, that's surprising, because you've got great quality content. That's why it's surprising when you say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you develop taste.
Yes. Yep.
But I still have quite a gap between my taste and my abilities on the visual front. So I'm good at finding people who match my taste and have the skill set to make it real. But, you know, it's honestly kind of a blessing that I never tried to edit my own videos, because it seemed like a skill set I never. Sure.
Sorry. Can I ask you a question about that? Because it's so important what you just said about how you didn't have the skill set to edit your own videos. And that stops so many people from actually starting out. We've heard so many people talk to us and be afraid of editing their videos or putting out videos because they don't know how to edit. Before we even continue, how did you get over that? Like in the very beginning, when you knew that wasn't one of your best skill sets?
Well, everything is a resources problem. If you don't have the skill set of editing, you can apply resources towards that. You can apply resources in terms of your time to learn it and get better at it through practice, or you can apply resources in terms of money to hire someone else to do it. So in the beginning, I started with podcasting. I didn't have a ton of resources, so I was doing a lot of the editing, the audio editing myself, and shipped it off to an engineer to basically master it. Now when I have video, I also have more cash because the business is generating cash. So I solved that editing problem with cash. Not everybody has that luxury, I realize. But you still have resources. Your time, your enthusiasm, your ability to learn, you'll apply that first. And I think that's a positive thing to do. I've always been someone who really believes in his ability to learn anything. If I'd wanted to learn editing, I could have put time towards it. I could have been doing the editing, and it probably would have slowed me down a great deal at the stage that I started doing video. So I'm glad that I personally didn't do that. However, if you feel like you don't have the skill set to edit your own videos, yeah, nobody starts with that. You have to earn that. And that starts now.
I love that. I think that's great. And the fact that you knew what your strengths and weaknesses were, because a lot of people, I assume, will just hit that roadblock and not create content, right? They just say, I don't either have the money to hire, so I can't do that. And I'm not good at editing. I don't want people to judge me, so I'm not going to do that either. But you started with writing. That was your strength in the very beginning. Am I right?
Correct.
And then you capitalized on that, and you started seeing success in that, and that's how you earned income as a freelancer in the very beginning, I assume?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was doing some odd jobs. I was doing website development. I was helping people put together copy in the form of emails, and I was tying those things together so that, you know, website visitors become subscribers, become customers, things like that. So I was able to do that for others. I taught other people, you know, the business of freelancing. That was my first set of courses. And then I, you know, every time I had launched something and started generating more revenue, I was trying to claw back more time, because the more time I spent on clients, the more time I was losing to what I could be developing assets for myself. And I was very cognizant of that early on. Everything I wanted to do required building of assets, and I'm using that term kind of loosely, but building of systems, products, content that even once it was developed, it would keep working for me. And when you do client work, you develop that, they pay for the development of it, and it keeps working for them, but it doesn't really keep working for you.
Yes.
And so every time I started generating some revenue, it was like, okay, I'm going to take back a little bit more of my time. I'm going to charge more. I'm going to do fewer things, and I'm going to focus on content creation.
That's amazing. That's a tug of war that me and Faraz have most of the time.
Yeah.
Client work between the work that we want to do for ourselves, because we believe what we do for ourselves will stay on our YouTube channel, on any other platform. But what you do for clients, yes, sometimes it pays well, but it's over. After you deliver, the time is gone and you don't have anything after that. How do you balance between the two?
Even now.
Even now, yeah. This is a hard decision. I mean, not a bad decision, but a hard decision to make.
I think the skill is living very cheaply, because the lower your financial constraints, then the less of your time you need to sell elsewhere, and the more you can start to develop on your own.
Yeah.
So this is the trap I see a lot of people who try to grow a team or build an agency get into. The more headcount you add, even if it is part-time, the faster your financial constraints grow. And so it's hard to eliminate clients or just charge higher rates, because you gotta cover this upcoming payroll or this upcoming, you know, invoice that's coming in. So in the beginning, I was a single guy living in a very small apartment in a cheap city, and I kept it that way. You know, like I was my first year, I think I earned $23,000. You know, and that was enough at the time. Costs have grown significantly, but no, it was $29,000. I'm looking at the numbers now. But anyway, it was not a whole lot. So reducing your financial constraints is really the lever to pull here, in my opinion.
That's a very important point, I think, because I've seen a lot of people start spending immediately when they get a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
And then the problem comes when they need to really work on themselves. Now they have to pay for this subscription, pay for the other stuff that they haven't considered for. This is an important lesson.
You know, I'm curious because usually you have to be burnt by this to learn it. Usually you can hear it 1,000 times and you never do it yourself.
We were burnt. Yeah.
We were burnt. Definitely burnt. I've spent the money I've earned, especially the first few times. I want to ask your story. Were you burnt yourself and then you learned it, or did you read it from a book and you applied it instantly?
I have my burn moments for sure, but I've always been good at learning from others' mistakes too.
Okay.
You know, there's this idea that sometimes you can only truly learn something through experience. I think that's absolutely true. But there have been times where I've been able to learn from other people's experience as well.
Yeah.
Like recently I've seen a lot of people who are sort of peers of mine. They're in my position. Any track you're on, there are these like sort of arbitrary markers of success or things that just feels like, oh, this is the next thing I should do.
Yes.
You know, I got here, so this is the next thing I should do. And in my space, there's a lot of people who feel like the next milestone is to sign a book deal. Oh. And I looked at that and I've thought that. And I've explored it a lot and I've watched other people who go down that path. And I've realized actually that's arbitrary. And even though I'd like to write a book, signing a book deal actually is in opposition with some of my own goals. So they're zigging, I'm going to zag over here. But I've certainly had some of my own burn moments. Like for the first year when I had my lowest income year, I didn't understand taxes. I didn't reserve enough money for taxes. And also I didn't understand cash flow. At the end of the first year, so when I was initially teaching people, it wasn't in the form of a course, it was in the form of group coaching. Right. And so those were 12-week programs that happened live. And the first year I ended a program in October. Came to learn nobody signs up for a 12-week program that spans Thanksgiving, Christmas, and
New Year. So
Got to count the holidays.
My main revenue source ceased to exist for the last 3 months, and I didn't plan for cash flow to pay for my bills. So that was a burn moment. Not planning for taxes, that was a burn moment. So I definitely had those moments, but you know, when I touch the stove, I touch it once.
Yes.
And that's it.
Oh, wow. I want to stay on the challenges that the freelancers have. And I think you talked about the ups and downs, and one is the seasonality of income. For those who are starting out, what do you think that is the most necessary skill as a freelancer? Because everybody think about their own skill, but is it accounting? Is it marketing? Is it knowing your tax for people who are starting out?
It's hard because as a freelancer or as a creator, you have to have such a diverse skill set. Because ultimately, to be successful in either one, you need to understand business. Entrepreneurship is a large toolbox that not everybody is equipped to. So like my flippant answer to your question is you have to have some business sense, which is a hard thing to put out there. But I think I might, if it's not like business sense, I might categorize it as, well, I have two things that come to mind. One is time allocation. You've got to be really good at understanding your time as a finite and valuable resource.
Yes.
And value it appropriately. The second, and it ties into that, I would call client selection. Are you guys familiar with Andy Warhol?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So he has famous painter.
Yeah.
He wrote a diary all of his life. They took his diary, they made a book out of it called the Andy Warhol Diaries, and then they made a Netflix documentary out of it. There's a point in his diary where he says, my friends ask me, you know, how I make so much money as an artist. And it's actually very easy. I find somebody rich, I sell them a piece of artwork, they tell their rich friends, and I sell them artwork.
Wow.
And like, that's very simple.
That sounds very simple,
kind of like,
yes.
But that's genius. That's genius.
It sounds simple. It's genius. But like, there's something to that even beyond the obvious, like, oh yeah, well, if your customers are rich. But think about this. Your clients will refer more clients like them. And so many freelancers, they start out undervaluing themselves. So they sell their services to a client who undervalues them as well. And they are in circles with more people like them. It's just what we do. We group up. So whatever you're doing, you are on the natural path of doing more of that unless you change that path. So client selection is what I would refer to as, instead of, you know, finding clients or settling for clients that are coming to you, you should really be setting systems in place and doing whatever you can to select for the type of client that you actually want to serve, knowing that that is going to perpetuate.
Dude, that is such a good reference. And I'm not even kidding. I haven't watched a Netflix series. I do know about the artist. And like you said, it sounds very simple, but it is so true, because when it comes to me and Farad as well, just a quick example is when you have a certain few clients, you can choose to go and spend some time on yourself, improve yourself, and actually improve your skill sets, and then start looking for newer clients. A lot of people just get stuck in their ways, and then they keep going. They complain about the situation, but they're not doing anything to change. And I want to quote one of my favorite people here, right? Farad, we found this quote today. All right, here it is. If you're not improving, chances are you're getting worse. Jay Clouse said this, by the way, in another podcast, and I'm quoting that. I don't know if you remember saying this, but we saw that.
As you're saying that, I'm like, oh, I love that.
That sounds like me. I love that. That's something you said before, and me and Farhad immediately, both of us at the same time, we heard it and we said, okay, we got to write it down, because so important. People think that when they reach a certain level of success, that they have it now. But the truth is, we're always in competition in anything that we're doing. And so if we're not improving, you're probably getting worse. If you don't remember when you said that, it's fine. But I just want to know what do you think about that yourself? How do you work on yourself every single day to make sure that you're not stuck in the same position and you're always getting better?
Growing up, I cared about sports a lot. I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to excel at sports. I was never that good. I'm just not that athletic. But I studied sports a lot. And even today, some of my favorite documentaries and things to watch are like docuseries about great athletes. Because there's something about seeing how people at the top of their profession, how they prepare, how they think, how they approach things, it just speaks to me. And I think underneath that is just this standard for excellence. You need to hold yourself to a certain standard of excellence. And if you do, it's very hard to not notice and fight up against getting worse. You know, if you have a high standard for yourself, you know when you're not doing what you could be doing. And all things are practice. All things are a muscle. If you do it, you get better at it. And as you get better at it, your standard raises. You know what your new standard is. So I'm very cognizant of when things are trending in the wrong direction. Like I feel it physically, and I have a strong urge to fight against that and go in the opposite direction. I don't know how to teach that. I don't know how to give that to somebody, but I think you need it, or things will go in the wrong direction. Like the natural way of the world is for things to get more disordered and chaotic over time. It's called entropy. It's a literal principle of, what is that, physics or chemistry. If you don't put more energy into the system degrades over time. So if you're not getting better, it means you're not putting energy into the system. And if you're not putting energy into the system, things are going to get worse.
I freaking love that. I absolutely love that.
I think a lot of people would be interested to know, in 2024, what would be the best way to start creating content and start their journey? Because now we have multi-platforms. There are different types of content, podcast, long form, short form. We have X.
Yeah, because X has changed. Twitter has changed X, and the way that content is shown on X has also changed.
If someone comes to you, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I think you need to think about it like this. There are two different types of publishing platforms. I call them relationship platforms and discovery platforms. Discovery platforms have a built-in mechanism for getting your content discovered. I'm talking social media, YouTube, even search broadly, I would say. These platforms are monetized with advertisement at like the platform level. And so they are incentivized to connect engaging content to consumers so that people remain on platform and they can sell more advertising. So it's important to leverage a discovery platform because that is how you grow your audience. It's just the easiest way to get your content in front of new viewers. However, there's a trade-off of the lack of control you have over that platform. Some people, were writing and publishing on Facebook in around 2015, and they got huge reach from their Facebook pages because they were publishing in 2015. Now that reach has gone to absolute zero. That can happen on any discovery platform at any time. The rules can change. You have nothing to do about it. Relationship platforms are means of distribution, systems of distribution that you own and control. They're decentralized. These would be email, podcasting, SMS, and to a degree, private communities. You know that if people opt into those methods of communication with you, your content will be delivered to them reliably every single time in a chronological way. There's no feed saying this is the most relevant message for you. There's a little bit with like the Gmail inbox, but if they subscribe via email, your email is going to go and get into their inbox. So to answer your question, I think every creator should adopt a strategy of one discovery platform and at least one relationship platform, because long-term, your relationship platforms are the assets that are enduring and more resilient. I think every creator should use email. So I think that's an easy decision. The bigger decision is what discovery platform or platforms do I invest in? And for that, you need to ask yourself, am I more drawn towards writing in text or video? That's kind of the first bifurcation of it. If it's video, ask yourself, do I want to do short form or long form? If the answer is long form, do YouTube. If the answer is short form, you can reasonably do all three: Instagram Reels, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. If the answer is writing, then your options are Twitter, LinkedIn, and Threads. And again, you can reasonably do all three. That's how I would approach this question.
Dude, the discovery and relationship platform concept is remarkable. I love that. And I want to just go back to that really quickly because me and Farad, I think we're mostly on discovery platforms.
Yeah.
We don't have a
Actually,
relationship.
I never thought about this.
Yeah, we don't have it. We've discussed the concept of newsletters, and actually,
By email, do we mean newsletters, just to be clear?
Great question. No.
Okay.
no.
So,
Okay,
I
what's the
think a
difference?
lot of-
We need a difference.
I think a lot of people have this question and they don't understand this. Think of newsletters and email like squares and rectangles.
Okay.
All newsletters are email, but not all email is a newsletter. There are ways to leverage email that do not require you to sign up for sending a broadcast every week in the form of a newsletter.
Please tell us how.
So my favorite way to do this is, there's two ways. I basically use email and create assets. One of them being a free email-based course. So if you go to creatorscience.com/course, that is a 7-day email-based course that you will get 7 emails every day for 7 days that are going to teach you how to become a professional creator. That, when I tell people, hey, go get that, people sign up for it. They're now in my email list. I can communicate with them whenever they want, but I also know they're having a good experience for the next week once they sign up. I wrote that months ago. I don't have to rewrite that. I can just make tweaks and make it a little better over time. You could apply that same concept and do what is usually called an evergreen newsletter. And this is the idea that instead of sending broadcasts through your email tool, you create a sequence of emails with every email that you write, so that when someone signs up, they start with email 1, then email 2, then email 3, then email 4.
Okay.
So when you write a newsletter, the way it usually works is whatever I write this weekend, whoever signs up for my email next week, they've missed everything before that.
Yeah.
And I'm starting from 0 with them. So an evergreen newsletter allows you to purposefully write and sequence your writing in the most impactful, helpful way. And everybody who subscribes gets that writing. And you don't have to sign up for writing something new week after week after week.
Dude,
Wow,
okay,
we didn't
thanks.
know that. Thank
Yeah.
you for clarifying that, because the biggest roadblock for us was that idea of you have to broadcast the news every week to someone.
Yes. And it's such a great tool for creators to use that is, I would say, untapped compared to, the usual discovery platforms that we talk about, TikTok and Instagram. So I just want to quickly ask you, when it comes to newsletters or any other sort of relationship platform, at which point in a creator's journey do you think they should begin? Do you think it's for someone who's already scared of content creation and is complaining about time, because usually that's how people usually start, right? They might have a full-time job or a part-time job and they're trying to get into this. Is it right to get into the relationship platforms immediately, or is it fine to maybe get into that 6 months, 1 year down the road?
It's fine to get into it later. I just think the longer you wait, the higher the level of risk.
Right.
Because theoretically, anytime you're showing up on a discovery platform, you should be making a positive impression on the people who see that. And if they have a positive impression of what they're seeing from you, you want to give them the opportunity to deepen the relationship on one of these relationship platforms. So the longer you wait to give them that opportunity, the higher risk you run of that person, for whatever the reason, no longer seeing your content on that discovery platform. Maybe there's just more competition in the feed. Maybe they grew tired of what you were saying. Maybe you said one thing that they disagreed with, So I think you run a risk, but also it does take a little bit more work to maintain more than one thing, which is why I really like this approach of creating an email-based course or an evergreen newsletter, because again, that's effort you put in one time up front. It might be a heavy lift at the beginning, but then you don't have to keep doing it. You can go back to focusing on the discovery platform, knowing, hey, I'm going to keep trying to route people back to email, and I know they're going to have a good experience when they get there.
Right. And for people who are thinking about monetizing their content, how big of an impact can these email lists in general, not just newsletter, email lists in general, have to their overall income? Is this something that will have a big impact, or will it be minor?
I think that the majority of my income comes from my email list.
Wow.
Boom.
Because when you're trying to get somebody to purchase something, you've got to bridge the gap between saying, hey, this is something that's available for you, and here's how to purchase it, to getting there to purchase it. In email, bridging that gap is as simple as linking some text. On a social platform, it's much more difficult. You have to say, link in my bio, or, if you append an actual link to the platform, depending on where it is, it's also probably going to perform worse and fewer people are going to see it. So email is just the shortest bridge from, hey, here's something available to you, to those people actually being able to purchase it.
Wow. And you know, one more funny thing, I feel like people get so much spam email these days. When they get a proper, good, decent email that is valuable to them, they actually are happy about that. So when you have an email list that is bringing a lot of value to people, and I think that's why it's working out. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Never really thought about implementing it yet, but we've had the discussion.
I never thought about the aspect of evergreen newsletter.
Yeah.
That or I think in one podcast also you mentioned about quizzes. So there was the concept of quizzes, and also the course. I think these are amazing entry points. You mentioned about the revenue stream of emails, and when we go to your YouTube channel, the first video that we see is you presenting all the different revenue sources that you have.
Just above $300,000. That was
2022.
Yeah, you were very transparent about it.
How did you find out about all those different revenue streams? Did they come one by one? Because there were so many of them.
Yeah. Everything happens one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. But in my line of work, I'm looking at a lot of people. I learn about a lot of different strategies that people are taking and a lot of different aspects to their revenue model. I do think that there's a risk of people trying to diversify too soon. It's going to be more impactful more quickly to get really good at one thing and then start to diversify, and then you can grow them sort of one at a time. I tried to do too much too soon, and it took me longer than it probably should have to get to where I am today. So you'll pick up a little bit here, a little bit there. Opportunities present themselves. Most of them are distractions. Most of them you say no to. But, we got to a point where I was writing email as a way to grow an audience. Come to find out, that's not the best platform to grow an audience. That's actually not a growth platform at all. But then started to realize, there's an opportunity to sell my own products through this email list. Awesome. Then people started asking if they could use my email list to sell products. Like they wanted to get in front of my audience. So, sponsorship. Interesting. Yeah. If that's available to me, I guess I could adopt that. Then there's this sort of in between that is affiliates, where if I'm going to recommend a product that I use, or it comes up naturally in what I'm talking about, and I'm essentially promoting this product anyway, there's an opportunity to get a commission on that through an affiliate link and an affiliate relationship. So these things start to present themselves over time. And then you start to understand that even the idea of a product is a broad concept, depending on who you serve and what you do. Product can take a lot of different forms. So when you're thinking about developing a product for your audience, you have to be really thoughtful and intentional about what that product is. And so, the last couple of years has been a lot of thinking about what products make sense to invest the time into developing and marketing. And again, most ideas are distractions. Even good ideas, you will have to say no to most of your good ideas.
Yes.
So
to pick the ones that are
2023,
best.
do you have that many, or no, you cut off many of the items that were on the list?
I only really cut off one major thing actively, and that was patronage. I got rid of my Buy Me a Coffee link. Everything else pretty much remained, but I allocated my time a little bit differently. I actually just did this breakdown before we got on the call to look at how things changed last year to this year. And for example, my services revenue dropped 7% this year.
Right. Okay. So this is the work that you were doing for clients?
Yes.
Okay.
I did less one-on-one consulting last year.
Okay.
So services revenue dropped, royalties revenue dropped, but everything else increased. Memberships increased, sponsorship increased, digital products increased, and even affiliates increased a little bit. So even though I didn't cut off any of those sources and say, I'm not doing any of that, I was doing less of things in terms of where I'm actually allocating my time.
So you were spending more time for your own community, like your own members, and creating for them. Am I right? That's where you saw the boost in the revenue.
Correct. I wanted to spend more time supporting members of my membership and creating content, because ultimately creating great content is what grows the business holistically at large. And that is one of the most time intensive things that I do on a daily or weekly basis. So where does that time come from? Where can I carve out that meaningful time? It got to the point where that time is more valuable to me than selling it to a client. Like at this point, I have to charge an hourly rate that's higher than most people are willing to pay. And that's okay. I would look at that and also say, I don't know if I want to pay that much for an hour. Totally fine. It's just understanding the value of your own time when it's applied to other things. It's more valuable for me to apply my time to creating content, to creating assets, because that is revenue that can be generated from that asset over and over and over again than selling an hour that goes into a black hole.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that perfectly makes sense. And I think with the intention that now you focus on your community, you can see that drop in services and an increase in the membership, increase in the products, because of course the focus has deviated to your own community.
Community is so important, because at the end of the day, whatever you do, when you have the attention of people, that is the real value. And as long as you're always giving more than taking, you know, whenever you need help, the community is going to be there to help you out. And we've seen that so much with this YouTube channel, because we've tried creating content before in different forms, different industries, and we've never really done it this way. This time, it's always been just tutorial, just helping. Whatever we learn, we share it, full transparency. Very similar to the video you did, not in terms of monetary values. We talk about our process in 3D, for instance, but the way that you transparently
yeah.
shared your revenue, I think that helps so many people because people get to see that it's possible to come out, do your own thing. And even if you don't have Casey Neistat numbers, you know, because everybody's just looking up to, you know, the very, very, very top, you can start making a really decent living. And it was amazing seeing that video. So thank you for that, because it helps a lot. Another thing that we noticed on your channel, and I think it's really important, is you've had a stellar guest list when it comes to the people you've brought on, the podcast and onto your channel. And we understand how difficult it is to reach out to people that you want to speak to because, you know, there's time limitations. It's hard to, you know, get to some people, but you've done that beautifully. And in another podcast, I believe it was with Riverside, you described how you reach out to people. And when me and Farhad heard about the way you speak to them, it was incredible. So I definitely want you to, you know, talk to the audience about how you reach out to people. But it's also really important because our audience, mostly made up of artists, it's not just about bringing guests to podcasts, because I don't think all of them have podcasts, but I do understand that they look up to some idols in the industry, some artists that they want to collaborate with, right? And they might not ever reach out to them because they're afraid, because they see their numbers, they're like, there's no way these guys are going to talk to me. So how do you get over that fear, first of all, to reach out to people, and how do you actually get them to say yes so that you can start building an authentic relationship with them?
Well, if you don't reach out to them, then no, they won't talk to you. Like, the decision is made.
Simple.
You know, it's funny and it's simple, but like some people have to hear that to think about it. Be like, you're right. I am giving myself zero chance by not doing it.
Yeah.
And I can give myself some chance by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, even if you get a rejection, whether they respond or whether they ignore it, as long as you presented yourself well, it's not a never, it's a no. And oftentimes a no, I had a sales coach one time and said, no is the second best answer you can get if you get it quickly. And so no's aren't bad. Let me give you an example. I've had some guests that I reached out to, kind of audacious of me to go to some of these guests at the stage that I did, and wrote a respectful email that they responded and said, not right now, or no, for whatever reason. And that was an opportunity for me to respond and say, no problem. Do you mind if I follow up 6 months from now? I always make the time window long because it seems very reasonable. And at some point people think, oh yeah, 6 months from now, that's 6 months from now, guy problem. And people will only say no so many times if you have made a good impression. So every no is just a step on the way to yes, if you are getting a no. But a lot of people, they don't have a very respectful approach, I would say. So the way that I typically reach out to somebody, I never send like a boilerplate email. It's the same person to person. There are some aspects that are the same, but every email begins extremely personalized. And it says, hey, the first paragraph is relating to something in their work that I truly appreciate to prove that I know them, I know their work, and this is a personally written email. And then I will usually say, I would love to talk about this on my podcast. Then I will write in bold the ask. Usually it looks like, would you be available for a 60-minute remote interview? I say remote because they should know, like, you don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. Easy.
Below that, I put in bold the pitch, and then I put the description of the show. And in that description, in that pitch, I give as much social proof as I can honestly put. Things like, this is on the HubSpot network. It's had 2 million downloads. I've spoken with guests like Seth Godin and James Clear and this person. Then I say, if you're interested, you can schedule right here. And I include a direct scheduling link. So if they are interested, if it did catch their attention and they say yes in their mind, they can take the action right there. Then I say, no pressure, no expectation. Thank you for the consideration. The trouble that a lot of people run into is they'll write a fairly decent email, and people will, we have a soft spot for people who were in the position that we were, and we want to say yes. But what happens to me all the time is someone will send me a message and I'll want to say yes. And the message ends with, do you have time in the next week or two? And the answer is absolutely not. I have no time in the next week or two. Are you kidding me? I'm protecting that with my life. So I always make the time window super long. Like, do you have time in the next several months? Because then we just feel like, of course, 60 minutes in the next several months. Yeah, I've got that. And then I always end it with no pressure, no expectation. Thanks for the consideration. So that they have an out. By giving somebody an out, they're more likely to opt in. So that's the way I generally approach that communication.
Dude, it's beautiful. Seriously, like I wish people watching, listening right now can take notes of this. We're definitely going to take notes of this. And the reason for that is because you've planned out every single part of that to make sure that the person receiving this email, this text is going to feel comfortable, right? You're not putting them in a position where they're uncomfortable. And it happens to us so many times as well on Discord, for example, when people come and they have a problem with one of the things they're trying out in the 3D software, usually the people who make it personal get an answer back because we're always busy with creating the next video. Same goes for you. But if they make it personal, it always works. When they say, and it sounds so simple, but a lot of people miss that. They just start with the problem. They just start with the ask.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's not only about the podcast. Like if you want to collaborate with someone, if you want to reach out to someone for anything else, the way Jay put it, make it personal.
Yes.
Don't put pressure on it. I think you will get a yes answer.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know. And what I have become very aware of is when I was younger and I didn't have the constraints and the complexities of my life and business that I do now, I just didn't even understand those things. So you may be looking at your calendar and it's completely open. So next week seems like a lot of time to you. That's a lot of warning. But for a lot of people, that's a very short-term thing, you know? So it sucks. As you get more successful, the number of people who want something from you increases, and the number of people who you would want to help also increases. And so it's emotionally challenging to reject people who are good people, who you want to help, who have approached you well. But when those people don't have any empathy for what you're going through in terms of how busy you are, how big of an ask 60 minutes of your time actually is. You know, I was just telling you, my hourly rate to do consulting now is really high. So even doing an hour-long podcast, that has a real cost to somebody, and it only scales depending on who you're talking to. If you don't have any empathy for that, and you're writing an email with expectation or pressure, it's not going to go over well for you.
Absolutely agree with that. And I also think about it this way. If you do get a no, you can use that as fire to go and work on yourself and make yourself better, grow your channel. I always think of it that way. So even if you do get a no, a rejection, you can use that as fire to improve yourself and then go back again later and try to fix what you maybe gotten wrong in that first text. And I think that could be also a good way to look at it, a different perspective, if you will.
And if you get a direct no, like you get a literal response and they say no, that is better than getting no response. That usually means that you warranted a response, which means that you were close. And if you warranted a response, again, that's actually a positive sign, because this gives you the opportunity to once again present yourself as different than most people and be gracious in the rejection and say, totally get it, no problem. I'm on your schedule. If you'd be open to it, I'd like to circle back in 6 months to see if it's a better time for you, you know? And then they're like, oh, wow, this person was very understanding. I felt bad rejecting them, but now they made me feel less bad by the way they received it. So the way that you can make people feel and the way that you receive rejection is also the next step towards an eventual yes.
Wow. Since we are talking about podcasts, I want to get your opinion about audio podcasts versus video, because I think you have done both. And what are the downside? Is it easier for people to start with audio? Is it easier to grow audience with any of the formats, or?
Well, an audio podcast is not an audience growth strategy. It's a relationship platform. So it's great at deepening relationships with people and building trust, but you're not going to build a new audience in audio. There are people who have, sure, but for the vast majority of people, overwhelming majority. It's not an audience growth strategy. YouTube is a discovery platform. So a lot of people are seeing that the opportunity is to do a podcast on YouTube because that's a way to actually grow an audience. Correct in theory, difficult in practice, very difficult. You have to think what videos do well on YouTube and get rewarded with organic views. Well, people have to click on the video and they have to have a good experience watching it. People are less likely to click on a video that's super long. So am I more likely to click on a video for an hour-long podcast or an 8-minute video with this great title and thumbnail that just opened up this curiosity loop that I want to watch? Probably going to choose that shorter video. Click-through rate on that longer form video drops. Click-through rate drops low enough, it's not going to get more impressions, it's not going to get any views. So to do a long-form podcast on YouTube, you have to get really good at packaging so that you can get the click and your click-through rate stays high enough that people... it gets real views. So theoretically, you could build an audience doing podcasting on YouTube. We've started to build a channel ourselves. It's doing pretty okay. It was really hard to do.
Understandable. Yeah. Moving on to 2024, I believe this was Farad, you showed me, was Mr. Beast's manager.
Yes.
Who put up some predictions. And I want to get your thoughts on it. He said that it will be more longer videos and slower editing, less cuts that will be taking over. So a little bit of a change in what people want to watch. And also a downhill with streaming compared to long form video content. What are your thoughts about that for 2024? Do you agree or disagree?
I could see an argument for it. This is Reed that put this out.
Yes.
So I think about anything as a pendulum, and a pendulum swings back and forth. So the pendulum has swung towards highly produced, highly cut, designed and engineered for retention videos. We might be reaching the edge of where that pendulum's going to go. People get bored. Things change. And it's usually as simple as a pendulum swinging back and forth. That's why fashion cycles. So I could see a world where the pendulum has reached the edge on retention engineering, and people want something feeling more natural and longer. I think that swing back is going to be very short. I think the idea of long videos that aren't cut that much are very attractive to the video creator because it means less effort.
Yes.
And the more people who jump into that medium, the more we're going to have extremely dull, miserable videos that take a long time. And so they're not going to perform that well for a long period of time. We see some people like this Sam Sulik or whatever the guy's name is that is doing this, and we think, this is the new thing. And really, it's just like a very unique guy who is able to break through. He's an exception. He's not a rule. I don't think he's really a canary in the coal mine. I think it takes a lot of charisma, and something about whatever you're doing has to be very novel and interesting for us to endure an otherwise slow and boring viewing experience. And for most people who are trying to emulate that, they're just going to be slow and boring, and the videos aren't going to perform. So I think we might see more of that, but by and large, as more people try to join that trend, people are going to declare that it doesn't work because it's going to result in a lot of really bad, really long videos.
I kind of see your point because it reminds me of Casey Neistat era when everybody started vlogging in the hope that, they will become the next Casey Neistat, but that was only one anomaly in the whole equation.
Yes. It's about the character as well, right? Who's behind the camera. And like you mentioned, like exceptions don't disapprove the rule. So it doesn't mean that it's going to work out for everybody. But I also do see why, again, the pendulum swing makes sense in this case, because everything changes at some point. You can never have something stay for a very long period. And we always see that shift happening. It's just a matter of how long it's going to last. Moving into 2024, what will be your own plan? What would be your goal, if you will, if you're trying to achieve success in your mind in content creation?
Well, we are going to have a baby this year. So that's goal number 1, is a safe and healthy birth in the middle of the year.
I love that.
Goal number 2 is preparing the business for that reality so that we can have a very comfortable post-birth existence. And so for us, there are 2 products that I want to launch before that time. So in the next 6 months. And I think, with that, I'll essentially have three products in my product suite. I'll have this digital product on the front end. I have a lower priced content-based membership, and then the lab, my relationship-based membership. And if I have that in place before the birth, then I'm very, very happy.
That sounds like a great plan, actually. And I feel like sometimes these challenging times, because I understand it's going to be a challenging year for you, it pushes you to even go further, right? And you tend to work even harder, and you try to do things that you wouldn't do otherwise. So I think it's going to be a great year. And I also want to ask, Farid, if you don't mind, about your platform, the Creator Science. And for people who are watching and listening and they've taken all these lessons from you today, what would be the first best place for them to get started if they're trying to become a creator, if they're trying to level up on your platform? Sure. Where would they start?
Go to creatorscience.com/course. That's where I have this free email course to help you become a professional creator. I really do think that is the best entry point into understanding how can I live this lifestyle. I don't have a better recommendation than that. I think that's the best place to go.
I'm going to put the link in the description for people to check it out. Definitely. I have another recommendation, actually, Jay. Jay's LinkedIn is full of articles and full of notes and highlights of all things about creators. That's one of the places I really enjoy reading. So I will put the link in the description too for people to also go and check it out.
Can I ask you one question before we go? What's your favorite social media platform?
Oh, that's a good one.
I still like Twitter the most. I've always loved Twitter. It's a bummer that like the culture there has changed a little bit. The way of engaging has changed a little bit. But when I think about where I spend the most time consuming as a creator, it's Twitter. That's very short form though. In long form, I really love podcasts. I've never been a huge YouTube consumer.
Oh, that's interesting.
I listen to a lot of podcasts.
And which podcasts do you listen to?
I listen to a lot of shows that focus on different creative practices. So I've always liked some of the comedy shows like You Made It Weird. I like Song Exploder and Dissect that breaks down music.
Interesting.
I'm enjoying David Perell's new podcast, which is on YouTube, called How I Write.
Oh, wow.
That's been very enjoyable. That's where I'm spending most of my time right now.
I love that. You know, everything you just mentioned, I have no idea about. So after this, we got some.
You're gonna go out check it out, right?
Yeah, it's honestly listening to podcasts has been probably the way we spend most of our time because there's so much to learn if you're just checking out different podcasts, and it's been one of the best mediums for us, which is why we also wanted to have our own. Because I feel like when you're sitting down for a 2-hour-long conversation, you tend to break things down in a way that you can't do in a 10-minute video, even if you're, having the best production for it, but it's cut up, right? You never have that raw conversation. So for us, that's the reason why. And I want to say thank you for your time, for coming here today, sharing your insights, because it is extremely valuable for people who are just starting out and people who want to level up. So thank you again, Jay. We hope everybody listening and watching will check out the email list that you talked about. We'll put the links, as Farid said, in the description, and we'll see you soon. So thanks again.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I think this was, in fact, a good decision.
Oh, thanks, Jay. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Got that approval.
Yes,
Let's go. All right. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Ciao.
Ciao.